we are. Let's see if we can get that. The Unseen Power Behind the Throne is the title we've given to this series. And this morning we're looking at Mordecai and Haman who clash. If Esther was a play, and sometimes it is performed as a play, there would be a cast list, and the four main characters would be presented to us in this way. We met Xerxes, in fact, the first character in the first chapter, in the first sermon. He is a very powerful king. He's the most powerful man in the world, and yet he's rather empty-headed, it seems to me. He's always relying on advice from his people around him. Maybe the advisors that we mentioned in chapter 1, or the young men, the hormonal young men that John mentioned a couple of weeks ago. He's also always giving, it seems to me, giving himself to eating and drinking. You'll see that he enjoys a good drink. He enjoys banqueting. So that's the king. We met the second week when John was speaking, Mordecai and Esther. Mordecai is a Jew whose family was taken into exile with other Jews. He is now in the capital Susa. And his cousin, Esther, has lost both her parents. She is an orphan. And he's taken her under his wing. He's bringing her up as his own child. Although they're cousins, I guess he's a lot older than her and is able to offer a sort of a fatherly care. We're told about Esther that she is lovely in form and features. A very beautiful young girl. But when King Xerxes wanted to gather all the young girls who were beautiful from his kingdom into the harem and choose one of them to be his queen, Esther was one of those who was not kidnapped exactly, but she was forcibly removed from her home and taken to the harem. John compared it to a gilded cage. That is, even though she pleases the king and she becomes queen, she is a captive woman, isn't she? She's been involved in a forced marriage. She has a great deal of power and wealth, probably, but she's nevertheless a captive woman living in a forced marriage. Now we meet the fourth of those four main characters. We met Xerxes, Mordecai, Esther. Now we meet Haman. Now the book of Esther is often read out, indeed sometimes it's acted out, as I said earlier, sometimes it's a play, acted out in synagogues around the world each year at the festival known as Purim. We'll see why that is as the story develops. And when Haman's name is mentioned, or he comes on stage, there are whistles, there are boos, there are hissing from the audience, because Haman is the villain. It was a pantomime, he'd be a pantomime villain, wouldn't he? But this is not a pantomime. Haman appears from nowhere. We haven't heard of him in the first two chapters. Suddenly, chapter 3 and verse 1, after these events, King Xerxes honoured Haman. Where does he come from all of a sudden? How has he got promotion to be the most important person in the kingdom after the king himself? He's the equivalent of the prime minister of this great empire, the most powerful empire in the world at the time. And everyone, therefore, kneels and pays him honour. Verse 2, all the royal officials at the king's gate knelt down and paid honour to Haman. Except Mordecai. Why not? Why does Mordecai refuse to kneel and pay honour to Haman? Now Mordecai is what we call today a civil servant. Have a look at chapter 2 and verse 21. We're told there, during the time Mordecai was sitting at the king's gate. Now he's not sitting there in the sun, trying to get a suntan. The king's gate is actually another name for, if you like, the government offices. We might call it today Whitehall. So Mordecai actually is a civil servant working in effect at a sort of Whitehall, the government offices in Susa. Chapter 3 and verse 2, it says there that all the royal officials at the king's gate. So there you've got all the civil servants at this king's gate. I guess there's a lot of buildings around that. If you go to a castle nowadays and you go in the main gateway, you'll see there's lots of rooms around the gateway. And I guess this is a place where many of the officials would have worked. Now Mordecai respects the king. We know that because he's saved his life, hasn't he? In chapter 2 and verse 21 to 23. We heard about that. And obviously being a civil servant, his duty is to serve the king. So he honours the king, in the way he works. He's obviously quite good at his job. He's got some sort of promotion to be there in the first place. So why doesn't Mordecai honour the king's right-hand man? That'd be quite usual in Persia at this time. You'd honour the man who's appointed by the king to be the chief minister. Why is he being so pig-headed? Is he being childish? Is he jealous? Actually, verses 21 to 23, he might have thought, well, actually, I'm the guy who deserves to be promoted. I just helped save the king's life. That's true, isn't it? He might have thinking, well, actually, why has this man come from nowhere and be promoted when I'm the guy who just proved himself? And actually, it's the case that the kings of Persia were very grateful for those who proved themselves loyal. And you'd have expected some sort of reward to have been given to Mordecai for his work in uncovering this plot. The real reason, I think, is found in verse 4. When he's plied with questions by the other officials why he refuses to bow down, he says he had told them he was a Jew. The end of verse 4. He had told them he was a Jew. That's why he was refusing to bow down. Now, let's see that in context. Let's open up the lens a bit more and see more of the bigger picture here. Go back to verse 1 of chapter 3. And we're told there that Haman is the son of Hammedatha, the Agagite. So, Mordecai is a Jew and Haman is an Agagite. If we trace back the Agagites, we find that there's a guy called Agag who appears early in the Bible in 1 Samuel, and his name is the name given to him because he is the king of the Amalekites. Now, the Amalekites were ancient foes of Israel. Amalek, actually, go back even further in the Bible, Amalek is the grandson of Esau. And Esau and Jacob, of course, Jacob was one of the heads of Israel. They were brothers who were often at war with each other. And we're told that Esau bore a grudge against Jacob. And that is continued with Amalek later on. And now we see the whole thing is spiralling down to Agag, and then on from Agag here to Haman. If you like, these two have got history between them. That's what we might say today. Actually, the Amalekites had attacked Israel when Israel was when God brought Israel out of Egypt and was leading them to the promised land. They had some stragglers, and the Amalekites attacked the stragglers and cut them down. And God remembered this. It was something that God took very seriously. These Amalekites looked at the Israelites, God's people, being taken from Egypt to the promised land, and they attacked not the whole of Israel, just the stragglers, very cowardly, and killed some of them. And so we see these words in Exodus, where it happened, Exodus 17. The Lord will be at war against the Amalekites from generation to generation. You shall blot out the memory of Amalek from under heaven. Do not forget. God, in fact, put a curse on them because of what they had done. Now, as time moved on, and when Israel became a kingdom, and Saul became the first king of Israel before David, God instructed Saul, through Samuel the prophet, to kill Agag, the king of the Amalekites. Saul defeated the Amalekites. He took Agag prisoner, but he didn't kill him. And God said that was a major act of disobedience on your part, Saul. And in fact, Saul lost the kingdom for that reason, that he was disobedient to God. But do you notice something? Go back to chapter 2 and verse 5. Who do you find in the ancestry of Mordecai? We're told that he is a Jew of the tribe of Benjamin, named Mordecai, son of Jair, the son of Shimei, the son of Kish. Saul was also the son of Kish. Probably a different Kish, but actually we're beginning to make connections here, aren't we? And recognise that actually there's a particular line of descent that comes through Israel, that came through Saul, and now it comes down to Mordecai, who, if you like, is the champion. On the other hand, you've got Agag here, or the son of Agag, Haman, who is, if you like, the champion of the other side. You've got these two champions, haven't you? One of Israel and one of the Amalekites, of the Agagites. And that is Haman. There is, if you like, unfinished business between the two. And a descendant from Saul is now going to be asked to respond to Agag, the descendant of Amalek. So when we read about Mordecai refusing to bow to Haman, there's a great deal of history, indeed theology, behind that. There's the renewal of an old enmity. We might think perhaps of Protestant against Catholic, or Serb against Croat, or Tutsi against Hutu in our world today. But this is not just another ethnic conflict. This has a spiritual character. Have a look at verse 10 of chapter 3. We're told there that the king took his signet ring from his finger and gave it to Haman, son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, the enemy of the Jews. The text makes it very clear that he is the enemy of the Jews. And the Jews here are not just an ethnic group. In the Old Testament, the Jews are the people who bear God's name, the name of Yahweh on them. They're the people that he has rescued from Egypt and was bringing into the promised land when they were so unfairly, so viciously attacked by the Amalekites. They are a spiritual people, whether they actually always know it or not. And therefore, Haman, the descendant of Amalek, the descendant of Esau, is Satan's tool to try and destroy the Jews. And Mordecai is the man who refuses to bow to them. So that's what we've got here, an ancient antipathy, but one that is spiritual in character and not just a matter of an ethnic conflict. Let's look at this guy Haman a little bit more. He is not an attractive person when we come to look at his character. We saw in verse 2 that he'd been promoted to become the king's chief minister. But you notice also in verse 2 it says that people knelt to him. Why? Not because he'd done anything, because for the king had commanded this concerning him. People bow and honour him because it is enforced on them. It's not something they do gladly from their hearts. We thought earlier about how we honour Christ from our hearts, what he's done. This is an enforced honouring of Haman because the king commands it. Secondly, we see that the officials, when they snitch on poor Mordecai and tell Haman about it in verse 4, when Haman hears in verse 5 that Mordecai would not kneel down or pay him honour, he was enraged. He was enraged. In verse 5. You see, Haman is someone who's pumped up with pride. He has an inflated sense of his own self-importance. And when that is pricked by what Mordecai does, he gets furious. Do you ever react like that? Are you furious because people don't respect you in some way? Do you know, the book of Proverbs says this: a man's wisdom gives him patience. It is to his glory to overlook an offence. When you're personally insulted, how do you react? Do you get very angry about that? How dare they treat me like that? How dare they speak of me like that? Or is it to your glory to say, actually, they're only a person, they're only a human being. I understand that. I care more about what God thinks of me than about what people say about me. That's what Proverbs is saying here. But Haman's not like that. He is pumped up with pride, and therefore he takes great umbrage at the fact that Mordecai will not bow to him. And then he decides to get revenge, but not just on Mordecai. He decides to get his revenge on the whole of the Jewish people. That is so unjust, isn't it? It's one thing to punish Mordecai if he thinks he's done wrong in not bowing to him, but to decide to take it out on the whole of the Jewish race. What have they done that deserves that? Isn't that so out of all proportion? This man is acting very wickedly to do this. And by the way, the whole of the Persian Empire would incorporate also Judea. So if this plan is carried out, it means all Jews throughout the whole empire will be killed. And that includes Jews in Jerusalem, Jews in Judea, as well as all around the rest of that huge empire. That it would include also the ancestors of Jesus Christ. If this plan comes about, the genealogy of Jesus Christ that you read about in Matthew's Gospel and elsewhere in the Bible will be cut. Jesus Christ will never come. to this earth, because there won't be any Mary or Joseph. Their ancestors would have been killed in this edict given by Haman. So we can see that actually there is a huge, if you like, cosmic proportion of this. It's not just one man against one man, not just a personal enmity. It's going to affect the whole of the Jewish race, God's people in the Old Testament. Next, like many people who get to a position of great power, Haman was very superstitious. Have a look at verse 7. In the 12th year of King Xerxes, in the first month, the month of the Nisan, they cast the pur, that is the lot, in the presence of Haman, to select a day and month. And the lot fell on the 12th month, the month of Adar. You see, when they decide to kill all the Jews, they decide they're going to do it on a lucky day. Fancy that. Let's choose a lucky day we're going to do it. The Romans did the same thing when they went into battle. They always had something called the auguries, that they would consult the auguries to see if it was going to be a good day for them before they went into battle, thinking that somehow that was going to help them. So Haman is very superstitious. Think of it, picking a lucky day to kill people. Isn't that ridiculous in one sense? But it shows that he is a pagan through and through. Next we see he is a schemer as well. Look at verses 8 and 9. Haman said to King Xerxes, "There is a certain people dispersed and scattered among the peoples in all the provinces of your kingdom." Do you notice it doesn't mention the Jews by name, does he? He avoids that because actually Xerxes might know that some of those Jews are his best servants in the government. So he doesn't mention the name Jew at all. And then he says they're dispersed in your kingdom and their customs are different from those of all other people. Well, that is true, isn't it? The Jews did have their own customs. They were different. But look how he carries on here. And who do not obey the king's laws. That is a blatant untruth. The Jews did follow their own customs, but they were very loyal to the king. Mordecai was a model citizen. He was a civil servant, as we said earlier. Think about Daniel also, who we've been looking at in our home groups. And Shadrach, Meshach and Abednego. They were all people who served either the Babylonian king or here the Persian king. And in fact, when they went into exile, Jeremiah had instructed the exiles to seek the peace and prosperity of the city to which I have caused you to go into exile. So the Jews were actually under instructions from the word of God to actually honour the king and to seek the prosperity of the city, whether it be Babylon or indeed here Susa. So it's a downright lie for Haman to say that because they are different, therefore they do not obey the king's laws. He then says it is not in the king's best interest to tolerate them. That wouldn't be true either, would it? Because we know that Mordecai and probably others as well were people who were benefiting the kingdom, serving the king, bringing their gifts for the benefit of the Persian state. And then he comes to his murderous conclusion, verse 9. If it pleases the king, let a decree be issued to destroy them. To destroy them. Notice also that he goes on beyond that. So look down at verse 13 briefly. We see there that when the decree went out, the dispatches were to destroy, kill, and annihilate all the Jews. 3 words meaning the same thing, but it's almost saying that that Haman wants every last trace of them removed from the face of the earth. We might call his behaviour pathological. That is, he's become totally obsessed with this goal of destroying God's people. Do you see a parallel there with Satan? Pathologically obsessed with destroying God and his people. You know, when Jesus came and spoke about Satan, or he was talking to the Jews at the time, and he said, "You are like your father, the devil. He was a liar and a murderer." What is Haman here? He's a liar and a murderer, isn't he? You see how Haman is taking on the same character of Satan in the way he's going about this. He also is murderous, there we are, and he's also corrupt as well, because he wants to offer a bribe. Have a look at verse 9 here. Haman says to the king, "I will put 10,000 talents of silver into the royal treasury for the men who carry out this business." That is a huge amount of money. It is millions and millions of pounds in today's currency, but even then it would have been about half the entire Persian Empire's annual tax revenue. What a bribe to get people to carry out this killing. Maybe he hoped to pay for that from the plunder. You see in verse 13, they're not only going to kill all these Jews, but also at the end of verse 13, and to plunder their goods. So I thought he thinks maybe I'll get rich out of this, and out of this riches I can actually pay the king something towards the expenses of having all these people butchered. Perhaps also it was an inducement to appeal to the people to join in with this slaughter. We see in verse 14, he wanted to involve all the nationalities. A copy of the text of the edict was issued as law in every province and make known to the people of every nationality so that they would be ready for that day. You see, he wants to draw in every nationality, and perhaps the offer of plunder would be an incentive to encourage them to join in with this mass killing. He appeals to the basic instincts of greed to get rich from the downfall of the Jews. But we are told at the end that the people of Susa were left bewildered in verse 15. This irrational behaviour, this pathological behaviour, they found it totally confusing. These people have been living among them for many years, decades. There have been no threat to them at all. Why is there this death warrant for their destruction? So there is chaos and confusion, and people are bewildered. And yet, at the centre of the city, there is Xerxes and Haman sitting down for a drinking session. The king and Haman sat down to drink. People are bewildered all around them, and they just want to go back to the bar and have a few more drinks and have a few more laughs together. What callous indifference there is to the evil they are perpetrating. They just sit down and have a good drink about it and slap each other's backs. If you watch the film Schindler's List, which some of you will have done, it's a pretty gory film, but it's a very realistic film about the Holocaust. And in that film there's a character, a German officer called Ammon. And Ammon is one of the officers in charge of one of these death camps in Schindler's List. And he spends his time enjoying himself. And he drinks and he finds other pleasures to amuse himself while the Jews are worked to death. It's a similar sort of picture. It's not identical, but it's similar in the way that this man Haman is behaving. Let's have a good drink together while people go out and prepare the edict to have these Jews slaughtered in the empire. So you see why it is that Haman is not a very attractive person at all. We can feel, can't we, when we read these sort of things, very frustrated, very powerless. When you wake up in the morning and hear the news about more deaths in Ukraine or Gaza or Myanmar, wherever else it is. Do you ever feel upset about that? Because you are powerless, you're frustrated? Do you ever fret when evil appears to triumph, as it does here, or about to triumph at any rate? Such injustice is going on, isn't it, around the world? But God says he is the Alpha and the Omega, the first letter of the Greek alphabet and the last letter of the Greek alphabet. He means by that he is at the beginning and he's at the end and everything in between. He is not moving along with history and learning as it goes along, as we do. You see history unravel. In Isaiah it says he knows the end from the beginning. So all of this is happening under his watch. He is like a chess grandmaster. You may not all play chess, but I'm sure you've heard of the game of chess. God is like a chess grandmaster who knows the outcome at the end, and he's simply plotting his route to that victory. He's moving his pieces into place. And if you ever played chess, it's not a game that actually you play very quickly. I played a game of chess with my son during COVID. He was in Southampton, I was here, and we played it on WhatsApp. And we did a move a day. And we spent about 2 weeks playing this game of chess. Likewise, God is not in a hurry. Actually, this is now the 12th year of the reign of Xerxes. Verse 7 says it's in the 12th year of King Xerxes that they cast the lot here. It's 5 years since Esther became queen. We read in chapter 2 and verse 16 that that was the 7th year of Xerxes' reign. And actually the whole book began in the 3rd year of his reign. 12 years earlier. Actually 9 years earlier, but 12 years into his reign. So actually already in the first 3 chapters, we've gone through 9 years of the reign of Xerxes. And I want to show you how God is putting his chess pieces in place. You know, if you've played someone who's very good at chess, they actually put a certain piece, maybe a knight or a bishop on the board, and that knight or bishop is waiting to pounce. And at some point, they'll move something and say, check. That's what's happening here, in some ways, in this story of Esther. Here are 3 of the chess moves that God is planning. First of all, go back to verses 21 and 23. We saw there that Mordecai had saved Xerxes from an assassination attempt. And yet, strangely, there was no reward given to Mordecai. That was unusual. Probably an oversight on the parts of the officials or the king. Maybe something else happened immediately afterwards, he just forgot about it. But notice it's all recorded. Do you see that? In verse 23. When the report was investigated and found to be true, the 2 officials were hanged on a gallows. All this was recorded in the book of the annals in the presence of the king. That is like a knight or a bishop being put in place on the chessboard. Watch it, it'll come back in the future. Secondly, I look at verse 7. When they cast this lot, the month of Nisan, they cast the lot, and the day came out for a day, or a day came out, so the month came out, the month of Adar, which actually is the last month of the year, the 12th month. They cast lots because they were being superstitious. But actually, if you know your Bible, Proverbs 16 verse 33 says this, the lot is cast into the lap, but its every decision is from the Lord. When they cast the lot, it's the Lord, God, who actually determines the month this will take place. And it's 11 months on. They cast the lot in the first month, and hey, it comes up the 12th month. Now, I'm sure that Haman would like to come up the second month and go about the business of slaughtering all these Jews immediately, but he can't now. He's been forestalled because the lot has come up and it's an 11-month delay. Plenty of time for God to actually organise his chess pieces to make sure that he comes out triumphant at the ends. And thirdly, have a look at verse 12. We're told that the decree was written out on the 13th day of the first month. The royal secretaries met, they wrote out the script for each province, in the language of each people, so the orders could be obeyed. If you're reading this and you're a Jew, that date strikes you very powerfully. It's a bit like I said to you, on the 24th of December, we're going to go to Exeter for a special treat. And you think, what do you think? That's Christmas Eve. It must be to do with Christmas. Yeah? If you're a Jew, and you look at this text here, the 13th day of the first month is the day before Passover. Do you see what the Lord is doing here? He's indicating to the people, don't worry, I've done it before. On the 14th day you were brought out of Egypt and I rescued you from the hand of Pharaoh. These people think they're going to have it over you, but they're not going to. In the same way that I dealt with Pharaoh and Egypt at the Passover, I'm going to make sure that you have your victory here as well. You will escape this. That 13th day of the first month, you think immediately, the day before Passover. I know now what's going to happen. I can see that the Grand Master has his plan. It's all going to work out. So, let's come to some conclusions. How can we make sense of all this? Having looked at that date and realised that it's a reminder of Passover, we can begin to understand it's all part of a much bigger picture. Indeed, a repeating pattern in the scriptures. We've been looking in our home groups at the book of Daniel. And in the book of Daniel, most recently, our home group has been looking at chapter 7, when Daniel has a vision of 4 beasts. And these 4 beasts represent 4 kingdoms of the ancient world. Indeed, the Persian kingdom was one of those beasts. It was the bear. It's the second of those beasts. And we can see now why they're called the beasts, because here is Haman using the power of the Persian state to exercise tyranny over the Jews and to try to destroy them. But it's not the second beast, it's the fourth beast that is most terrifying in that vision that is given to Daniel. The fourth beast represents Roman rule. And it was under Roman rule that the Jewish leaders conspired to have Christ killed. What happened to Jesus is almost like a replay here of what seems to be happening to Mordecai and the Jews. Because we're told that in the New Testament that the Jews schemed. They schemed, just like Haman, to get Pilate's consent. So they had to go, Haman had to go to Xerxes. The Jewish leaders had to go to Pilate to get his consent. We're told they bribed Judas. And having done that, they then concocted half-truths and lies to convict Jesus and have him executed. Can you see the parallels? In Acts chapter 4, we read there that Herod and Pontius Pilate, met together with the Gentiles and the people of Israel in this city, Jerusalem, to conspire against your holy servant Jesus. See how the conspiracy comes back under this fourth beast and is more terrifying. This is against your holy servant Jesus, an attempt to destroy him, just as Haman wanted to destroy the Jews in his time. And that pattern is repeated also after that as well, because we're told that the people of God, those people who come to faith through Christ and come to believe in God as Father and receive salvation, they too become targets of the evil one. In the book of Revelation, the devil is pictured as a dragon, and he's pursuing the people of God. The devil, it says, is filled with fury because he knows his time is short. We see, for instance, one of the early Christians, Stephen, was martyred by the mob, if you like, in Jerusalem at the time. And we're told that when Stephen was telling them about the gospel, they gnashed their teeth at him. They were furious, just like Haman was furious. And they ran at him and then they killed him. And he was the first Christian martyr. So the whole pattern repeats time and time again. The dragon, Satan, inspires people, Haman here, Pilate and the Jewish leaders, and then afterwards many examples of leaders who have been co-opted into Satan's plan. Nero, who was of course executed many Christians under his rule. In our own time, communism sought to wipe out Christianity in those great countries of China and Russia. Militant Islam also, when they kidnap and murder Christians today. Listen to these words from Revelation, which speaks about this behaviour that the devil inspires in people. This is Revelation chapter 13. The beast, that's the power of a state, was given a mouth to utter proud words and blasphemies, and to exercise his authority for 42 months. He opened his mouth to blaspheme God and to slander his name and his dwelling place and those who live in heaven. He was given power to make war against the saints and to conquer them. And he was given authority over every tribe, people, language and nation. All inhabitants of the earth will worship the beast, all whose names have not been written in the book of life belonging to the Lamb that was slain from the creation of the world. You see why why Mordecai refused to bow to Haman? All the inhabitants of the earth will worship the beast, the power that's been raised up by Satan. All whose names have not been written in the book of life, belonging to the Lamb that was slain from the creation of the worlds. Let's think about how we can apply that to ourselves today. First of all, there are those people who find the whole thing bewildering. The people of Susa were bewildered. If you're here this morning and you're not a Christian, perhaps you are a bit bewildered by what is going on around the world, maybe, but also maybe by what you've heard this morning. And you think, well, is this really true? Is Satan real? There's certainly enough chaos in the world to explain that, perhaps. But all this talk of Satan and spiritual warfare, is there really some sort of divine plan behind it all? Well, that's what the Bible claims. And the Bible calls you to decide which side you're going to stand on. Do you want to remain in Susa and remain bewildered? Or are you going to actually decide on that day that you will not join with Haman and his murderous plans? The people of Susa are in a quandary. Perhaps you are this morning as well. Where do you stand? Where are you going to stand? When Christ comes again and he takes all those who have not bowed the knee to the beast, where will you be? Which side will you be on? Jesus Christ came and he died on the cross to defeat Satan, and we now live in that period of time before he returns when he's appealing to people. Come to me, he says, all you who weary and are heavy laden. I've got water, I've got meat and drink for you. I want to supply you with eternal life. I want to give you the best you could possibly have in this world. But you need to turn from your sin and come to me. There is a way out. There is a route by which we may not have to bow to this beast. If you are a Christian, then we have some words from Peter in particular to take to heart this morning. Peter, that first apostle of the Lord. Dear friends, he says, do not be surprised. Do not be surprised at the painful trial you are suffering, as though something strange were happening to you. You see, it isn't strange. We've seen it all through the Bible, haven't we? The same pattern repeating time and time again. This is normal in this world. Haman and people like him will be raised up and will seek to attack, and if they can, to destroy the people of God. He says, later on in that same, in 1 Peter, your enemy, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion, looking for someone to devour. He's looking for that. That's who he is, a roaring lion. And Haman is like a roaring lion here, isn't he? On behalf of Satan. He'll use all sorts of threats, all sorts of people he'll raise up, Satan that is, to achieve his goal. He raised up Haman. He raised up the scribes and the Pharisees who sought to convict Jesus. Herod and the Romans likewise. Today perhaps he raises up scientists and celebrities who like to ridicule the Christian faith, or presidents and generals. Peter says, don't be intimidated. Mordecai was not intimidated, was he? By Haman. He could have easily been. Instead, he was courageous. So the word of God to us this morning, I think, is saying two things if we're Christians. Don't be surprised. This is not, if you're finding yourself under persecution at work, or you come from a country where there has been persecution, as some of people who've come here have been in the past, don't be surprised. It's nothing strange. We are part of God's people and we should expect this sort of behaviour. But we are called to be people of courage. Mordecai was a man of courage because he refused to bow to Haman. Now I expect Mordecai, like most of us, don't like conflict. We don't seek it out. Perhaps with someone who would say, I just want a quiet life. Anything for a quiet life, in fact. Mordecai could have gone for a quiet life as well. He could have bowed the knee to Haman and carried on with his job as usual. But I expect the problem would have recurred in one form or another later on. He refused to do that. And you could say he brought trouble on himself and on his people. But the Bible calls his behaviour courageous. And God is the master strategist. He is the grand master. He does have a plan for deliverance, just like Passover and just like what happened on the cross. We'll hear more about that next week when John is speaking to you from the next chapter, chapter 4, how God's plan begins to be revealed. But be assured of this, there is a rest coming. If you're someone who longs for that quiet life, longs for anything, have rest from all the conflict of the world, yes, Christ promises that. Come to me, all you who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Rest in your soul now, peace with God now. Calm and assurance that God is your Father and that He has your soul in His hands, and nothing can take you, no one can snatch you out of His hand. He has promised that. And to come, there will be a new heavens and a new earth, where all of this sort of behaviour, all of this anguish, all this pain will be abolished. Let's be patient and hang on for that. He is coming soon, he says. Let's bow our heads for a moment.